My kids said, "Skip Thanksgiving, we need space." Then posted beach photos while I sat alone with their dead mother's empty chair. I'm Joe Johnson. 6 months ago, I buried my wife Margaret after 18 months of cancer hell. Last week, my 3 adult children called with their Thanksgiving decision. "We're going to Cabo instead, Dad. We need to process grief our way." They'd already booked the $3,400 per person resort before telling me. So Thursday morning, I cooked Margaret's 15 traditional dishes by myself. Set her place at the table like always. While I honored 42 years of marriage traditions alone, they posted Instagram stories. "Living our best life. Mom would want this," with margaritas and matching blessed and grateful t-shirts. That's when I made the phone call that changed everything. You see, Margaret left me complete control over their $2.6 million inheritance. And she'd written very specific instructions about what to do if our children revealed their true character after her death. If this story sounds familiar, hit that subscribe button. I'd love to know where you're watching from and whether you've ever had to choose between enabling family or honoring a loved one's memory. Here's exactly what happened next. Margaret passed away on May 15th, 2024, after an 18-month battle with cancer. I was her caregiver every single day, drove her to chemotherapy twice a week, held her hand through every procedure, watched the strongest woman I'd ever known fade away piece by piece. Our children, Kevin, Rachel, and Matthew, they visited occasionally. Kevin would stop by after work, checking his phone the entire time. Rachel brought flowers once a month, staying just long enough to take a selfie with Mom. Matthew called from California, always promising to visit next weekend. But Margaret never complained. She'd smile and say, "They're busy building their lives, Joe. That's what we raised them to do." 6 months later, I was still setting her place at the table, still talking to her empty chair, still making her coffee every morning before remembering she wasn't there to drink it. The house felt like a museum. 42 years of marriage displayed on every wall. Her reading glasses still on the nightstand. Her favorite cookbook open to the cranberry walnut stuffing recipe she'd perfected in 1982. I'd been seeing a grief counselor, $120 per session, trying to figure out how to live without my best friend. Dr. Peterson kept telling me that healing takes time, that the first holidays would be the hardest. That's why Thanksgiving mattered so much. I spent 3 days preparing Margaret's entire menu. Her famous cranberry walnut stuffing, maple, bourbon, sweet potatoes that cost me $45 in ingredients alone, green bean casserole with those crispy onions she always burned slightly because I liked the edges crispy. I set the table for 8, just like always. Margaret's chair at the head, where she could see everyone's faces. Her good china that we only used for holidays. The centerpiece she'd made from pine cones and autumn leaves 20 years ago. But 10 days before Thanksgiving, Kevin called. "Dad, we need to talk about Thursday." I could hear the reluctance in his voice, the careful tone he used when delivering bad news to clients at his law firm. "The kids and I have been discussing it," he said. "We think it might be better if we skip Thanksgiving this year." Skip Thanksgiving. Like it was optional. Like 42 years of tradition could just be erased. "We need space to process our grief differently," Rachel added. She was on speaker, of course. They'd planned this conversation, rehearsed their talking points. "Dad, you need to move on," Kevin continued. "Mom wouldn't want this shrine behavior." Shrine behavior. That's what he called honoring his mother's memory. "We can't be your emotional support system forever," Rachel said, her marketing director voice crisp and efficient. "It's not healthy for any of us." Matthew chimed in from California. "Dwelling on the past isn't healthy for anyone, Dad. We'll FaceTime you from the resort, okay?" Resort. They weren't just skipping Thanksgiving, they were going on vacation. "We booked a healing retreat in Cabo," Rachel explained. 4 days of meditation and self-care. We need to process Mom's death in our own way. 4 days, at $850 per night per person at the Grand Velas Resort. I looked it up later. $3,400 each for their healing retreat. Meanwhile, I was still paying off Margaret's final medical bills, $340,000, in cancer treatments that insurance didn't cover. Money I'd gladly spend again to have one more day with her, but my children needed space. I hung up the phone and stared at Margaret's empty chair. For the first time since her funeral, I cried. Not the quiet tears I'd been shedding for months, but deep, body-shaking sobs. My wife had made me promise something before she died. "Take care of the kids, Joe," she'd whispered during her final week, "but don't let them take advantage." Sitting alone in our kitchen, surrounded by Thanksgiving preparations for a family that wouldn't come, I finally understood what she meant. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Margaret's final wishes. She'd left detailed instructions about everything: where to donate her clothes, the women's shelter downtown, which jewelry pieces should go to which family members, even which flowers to plant in her memorial garden come spring. But she'd been very specific about one thing: the inheritance. "Promise me you'll see how they handle my death," she'd said. "How people treat you when you're grieving tells you everything about their character." Margaret had been a school principal for 30 years. She understood people. She could spot a faker from across a crowded room. Our estate was worth $2.6 million. The house we'd bought in 1985 for $89,000 was now worth $680,000. My pension from the electric company, Margaret's teacher retirement fund, life insurance policies we'd faithfully paid for decades. The children knew about the inheritance, of course. Kevin had asked about estate planning 3 times in the past year. Rachel had casually mentioned updating the will after the funeral. Matthew had even suggested I might want to simplify my finances by transferring assets early. They weren't just my children anymore. They were beneficiaries waiting for their payday. But Margaret's family, her sister Patty and the cousin families, they'd been different. They'd shown up during the cancer battle without being asked, brought casseroles when I was too exhausted to cook, sat in hospital waiting rooms during Margaret's surgeries. The Browns, Margaret's nephew Tom and his family, had driven 4 hours every month just to spend weekends with us. Their kids called Margaret Grandma Maggie and made her hand-drawn cards during chemo. The Davises, Margaret's cousin Sarah and her children, had taken vacation days to help with medical appointments. They'd reorganized our entire kitchen to make it wheelchair accessible when Margaret couldn't climb stairs anymore. These weren't blood relatives to me, but they'd become family through their actions. Meanwhile, my own children had been noticeably absent. Kevin had missed Margaret's final chemotherapy session because of a client dinner. Rachel had skipped the last family birthday party because she was launching a new campaign. Matthew hadn't visited since Christmas 2023. Now they wanted to skip the first Thanksgiving without their mother. The stakes were crystal clear. If I said nothing, if I enabled this behavior, I'd be teaching them that abandoning family during crisis has no consequences. That grief could be scheduled around vacation plans, that 42 years of marriage traditions meant less than 4 days in Cabo. But Margaret had given me another option. 6 months before her death, we'd met with our estate attorney, Robert Mitchell. Margaret had insisted on adding what she called flexibility clauses to our will. "I want Joe to have complete discretion over inheritance distribution," she'd told him. "People's true nature shows up after funerals. If our children prove themselves worthy, wonderful. If not, I trust Joe's judgment about who deserves our life's work." The attorney had raised an eyebrow, but drafted the language Margaret requested. The will gave me irrevocable authority to redirect inheritances based on demonstrated family commitment and character. I thought it was unnecessary at the time. These were our children. Of course, they'd take care of their grieving father. But sitting alone at 2 a.m. on November 18th, 10 days before Thanksgiving, I realized Margaret had seen something I'd missed. She'd prepared for this exact moment. The question wasn't whether I could change the inheritance. The question was whether I had the courage to honor my wife's final wish, to reward character over biology. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Robert Mitchell's number. The decision was already made. I just needed to confirm the legal details. The next morning, I called Kevin back. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began, keeping my voice steady, "about needing space. Thanks for understanding, Dad. Relief flooded his voice. This is really for the best. Before you finalize your plans, I said, I want to make sure I understand correctly. You're choosing to spend Thanksgiving in Mexico instead of honoring your mother's traditions? Silence. Dad, it's not that simple, Rachel jumped in. She was on speaker again, of course. Grief isn't one size fits all. Your mother spent 42 years perfecting those recipes. We know that, Kevin said, his lawyer voice kicking in. But we need to create new traditions. Healthier traditions. Healthier. Like Margaret's carefully preserved family customs were toxic. I've already bought all the ingredients, I continued. Spent 3 days preparing. Dad, you can't guilt us into... I'm not guilting anyone. I'm asking a simple question. Are you absolutely certain you want to be in Cabo when you could be here, celebrating the woman who gave you life? Matthew's voice crackled through the phone from California. We'll FaceTime you from the resort, okay? You can show us the table. Show them the table, over FaceTime, while they sipped margaritas. The resort is already paid for, Rachel added quickly. Non-refundable. How much? I asked. Another pause. That's not really relevant. How much, Rachel? $3,400 each, she admitted. But it's a healing retreat. We're processing trauma. $3,400 each, while I was still making monthly payments on their mother's cancer treatments. I see, I said quietly. And when did you book this healing retreat? What does that matter? Kevin's voice had shifted, defensive now. Just curious about the timing. November 10th, Matthew said before his siblings could stop him. November 10th, 8 days before they'd called to cancel Thanksgiving. They'd booked their vacation before they'd even told me they weren't coming. The abandonment was premeditated. So you planned to skip Thanksgiving before asking me how I felt about spending the first holiday without your mother alone. Dad, that's not... It's exactly what happened, I said. You made vacation plans, then informed me I'd be eating Thanksgiving dinner by myself. You're being manipulative, Rachel snapped. Her marketing training was showing. When caught in bad PR, go on the offensive. Am I? I think I'm being honest. Something your mother always valued. Don't bring Mom into this, Kevin warned. She's already in it. This is her Thanksgiving menu, her table, her traditions, the ones you're abandoning for a Mexican beach. We have the right to grieve however we want, Matthew said. You absolutely do, and I have the right to know where I stand with my children. What's that supposed to mean? Rachel's voice had gone sharp. It means actions have consequences. Your mother understood that. She spent 30 years teaching children that choices matter. Are you threatening us? Kevin's lawyer instincts were fully engaged now. I'm stating facts. You chose Cabo over your mother's memory. That's a choice with meaning. You're being ridiculous, Rachel said. One holiday doesn't define our relationship. Doesn't it? The first Thanksgiving without the woman who raised you, and you're posting beach photos instead of honoring her legacy. We haven't posted anything yet, Matthew protested. But you will, I said quietly. Because that's what this is really about. Social media content. Living your best life while your father grieves alone. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Finally, Kevin spoke. If you can't respect our boundaries, maybe we need more space than just Thanksgiving. There it was. The ultimatum. Accept their abandonment or lose them entirely. I understand, I said. And I did understand. I understood exactly who my children had become. We'll call you Thursday, Rachel said, her voice artificially bright. Around noon, before the resort dinner. They'd call me. While I sat alone with their mother's empty chair, they'd call me from their Mexican resort to check a box, fulfill the minimum obligation to their grieving father. That's very thoughtful, I said. We love you, Dad, Matthew added, like an afterthought. I know you do, I replied. In your own way. After I hung up, I sat in Margaret's kitchen for a long time. Sunlight streamed through the window where she used to stand washing dishes, humming old songs while she worked. 42 years of marriage, and I'd never felt more alone. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't experienced since Margaret's diagnosis. Clarity. My children had shown me exactly who they were, not in words, but in choices. They'd chosen comfort over character, vacation over family, social media over sacred memory. Margaret had seen this coming. She'd prepared for it. Now it was time to honor her final request, to reward character over biology. I picked up my phone and dialed Robert Mitchell's office. Robert? It's Joe Johnson. I need to schedule an emergency meeting about Margaret's estate. How soon can you see me? Is tomorrow morning too soon? He asked. Tomorrow's perfect. And Robert? Bring the amendment forms Margaret requested. All of them. The discretionary redistribution documents? Every single one. Robert Mitchell had been our attorney for 15 years. He'd handled Margaret's will, our house refinancing, and all the medical power of attorney paperwork during her final months. His office sat in downtown Springfield in one of those converted Victorian houses that lawyers love. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound law books, the smell of old paper and quiet authority. Margaret was very thorough about this, Robert said, spreading documents across his mahogany desk. She anticipated exactly this scenario. I stared at the legal papers. Margaret's handwriting filled the margins, notes she'd made during our meetings, clarifications about her intentions. She wanted you to have complete discretionary control over inheritance distribution, Robert continued. The language she insisted on is quite specific. You can redirect assets based on demonstrated family commitment and character during times of crisis. Margaret had thought of everything. What about legal challenges? I asked. But if the children contest? Robert adjusted his glasses. Margaret anticipated that too. She included a clause stating that any beneficiary who legally challenges the redistribution forfeits their right to any inheritance whatsoever. It's ironclad. My wife had been protecting me even after death. There's something else, Robert said, pulling out a sealed envelope. Margaret left this for you. Instructions to open only if you decided to exercise the discretionary clauses. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Margaret's careful handwriting filled 2 pages. My dearest Joe, if you're reading this, it means our children have shown their true character after my death. I'm sorry, my love. I hoped I was wrong about them. But I want you to know, you're not abandoning them. They've abandoned you. The Browns and Davises have been more family to us these past 2 years than our own children. They deserve our life's work more than Kevin, Rachel, and Matthew do. Don't feel guilty about this decision. You're honoring family, real family, the people who showed up when it mattered. Love always, Margaret P.S. I've already given the important jewelry pieces to the cousin girls. The ones Kevin, Rachel, and Matthew think they're inheriting? That box is empty. They never bothered to ask what I wanted to pass down. I had to stop reading. The letter blurred through my tears. Margaret had seen this coming months ago. She'd watched our children's behavior during her illness and drawn conclusions I'd been too hopeful to accept. She also prepared specific documentation about the cousin family's involvement during her illness, Robert said gently. Hospital visit logs, thank you cards, photos of them helping with medical appointments, a complete record of who actually showed up. I thought about the Browns and Davises, how Tom Brown had taken vacation days to drive Margaret to chemotherapy when I couldn't handle seeing her so weak, how Sarah Davis had reorganized our kitchen to accommodate Margaret's wheelchair, then refused payment for the modifications, how their children, Margaret's chosen grandchildren, had made her final months brighter with their constant visits and hand-drawn cards. What's the timeline for making these changes? I asked. I can have the amendments drafted by tomorrow afternoon. We'd need 2 witnesses for signing, then file with the county within 72 hours. Tomorrow was November 21st, 3 days before Thanksgiving. The cousin families, I said, they should probably know about Thanksgiving dinner, that it's still happening. Robert smiled. Margaret mentioned you might say that. She left their contact information right here. Of course she had. I pulled out my phone and dialed Tom Brown first. Tom, it's Joe Johnson. I know this is short notice, but are you and your family available for Thanksgiving dinner? Of course, Uncle Joe. Tom had called me that since Margaret's funeral. We were hoping you'd invite us. The kids have been asking about Grandma Maggie's stuffing recipe. Uncle Joe. Not because we shared blood, but because I'd earned the title through Margaret's love. And the Davises? Already planned to drive up Wednesday night. Sarah made Grandma Maggie's cornbread recipe. Wanted to surprise you. They'd been planning to come all along, waiting for my invitation, ready to honor Margaret's memory without being asked. Tom, I said carefully, would you mind being present for something important on Friday morning? I'm meeting with my attorney about estate matters. Margaret left some specific instructions. Whatever you need, Uncle Joe. We're family. Family. The word carried weight when Tom said it, meaning earned through actions, not assumed through genetics. After I hung up, Robert gathered the legal documents. One more thing, he said. Margaret set up a small fund specifically for the inheritance announcement. She wanted it done publicly, with witnesses, something about transparency in family matters. Even the revelation was planned. Margaret had orchestrated every detail, ensuring her final lesson would be witnessed and remembered. She really did think of everything, I murmured. Margaret was a principal for 30 years, Robert replied. She understood that some lessons require public consequences to be truly learned. Thanksgiving morning arrived gray and cold. I woke up at 5 a.m., like I had every Thanksgiving for 42 years. Margaret used to wake up with me, padding around the kitchen in her fuzzy slippers while I started the turkey. This year, I set the timer alone. By 10 a.m., the house smelled exactly like it should. Turkey roasting, cranberry sauce simmering, Margaret's cornbread stuffing filling the kitchen with sage and celery aromas. I'd set the table for 10. The Browns and Davises would arrive at 2 p.m., just like Margaret had always preferred. Their children, Emma, Sophie, Jake, and little Olivia, would fill the house with the kind of energy Margaret had missed when our own kids stopped coming around. At 11:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. Instagram notification. I didn't use social media much, but I'd learned to check it after Margaret's death. Neighbors and friends often posted memories of her that I wanted to see, but this notification wasn't about Margaret. It was from Rachel's account. A photo posted 7 minutes ago. The image hit me like a punch to the chest. Rachel, Kevin, and Matthew raising margaritas on a pristine Cabo beach, all three wearing matching Blessed and Grateful t-shirts, palm trees swaying in the background, crystal blue water stretching to the horizon. The caption read, "Sometimes healing means breaking cycles. Grateful for chosen family and new traditions. Mom would want us living our best life. Cabo 2024, choosing, joy, grief, journey, blessed." Mom would want us living our best life, while I stood alone in the kitchen she'd designed, cooking recipes she'd perfected, honoring traditions she'd cherished for 4 decades. I scrolled through the comments, dozens of heart emojis. You guys deserve this. So brave. Living your truth. Living their truth. Which apparently meant abandoning their grieving father on the first Thanksgiving without their mother. But it got worse. Kevin had posted a video to his story. The three of them clinking glasses, laughing at something off camera. Matthew shouting, "To freedom!" while waves crashed behind them. To freedom. Freedom from family obligations. Freedom from grief. Freedom from honoring their mother's memory. I screenshot everything before it could disappear. Then I kept scrolling. More photos. The resort pool. Expensive seafood dinners. Spa treatments. Kevin getting a massage while wearing sunglasses that cost more than Margaret's final cancer medications. They weren't just skipping Thanksgiving. They were celebrating skipping it. My phone rang. Mrs. Patterson from next door. "Joe, honey, I saw the kids posted photos from Mexico. Are they not coming for Thanksgiving?" Word was spreading. Our neighbors had seen the posts. "They needed space to grieve," I said, using their exact words. "Space to grieve?" Mrs. Patterson's voice sharpened. "They're at a resort bar." "I know. That's disgraceful, Joe. After everything you and Margaret did for those children." I hung up before she could continue, but the phone kept ringing. Margaret's book club friends, church members, neighbors who'd watched our children grow up. Everyone had seen the social media posts. Everyone understood the betrayal. At 12:15 p.m., another Instagram story appeared. Matthew at the resort restaurant, surrounded by perfectly plated gourmet food. The caption, "When the universe gives you exactly what you need." Grateful for this healing space away from toxic family patterns. Toxic family patterns. 42 years of marriage, 18 months of caregiving, 67 years of building a life worth inheriting. Toxic. I called Robert Mitchell. "Robert, it's Joe. I need you to document something. My children just posted social media content that proves Margaret's point about their character." "I'll be right over with my camera," Robert said. "We'll screenshot everything for the legal record." At 1:30 p.m., the Browns arrived early. Tom took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "Uncle Joe, what happened?" I showed him the Instagram posts. Tom's wife, Linda, gasped. "They posted this today? On Thanksgiving?" "While their father is home alone cooking their mother's recipes," Tom said quietly. His voice carried the same disappointment I felt. "There's more," I said, showing them Matthew's toxic family patterns story. Linda's hand flew to her mouth. "How dare they, after everything Margaret did for them?" The Davises arrived at 2 p.m. sharp, bringing Sarah's cornbread and homemade apple pie. When they saw the social media posts, Sarah Davis actually cried. "Margaret would be heartbroken," she whispered. "Absolutely heartbroken." At 2:47 p.m., while we were saying grace around Margaret's table, my phone buzzed again. Another Instagram post from Rachel. This one showed all 3 children on the beach at sunset, arms raised in celebration. The caption read, "Finally free to process grief our way. Some families support healing. Others try to trap you in the past. Grateful we chose growth over guilt." At boundaries. Self-care / new beginnings. Chosen growth over guilt. They'd turned abandoning their grieving father into a personal development victory. But what they didn't know was that their social media celebration was being witnessed by more than just their friends. At 3:15 p.m., Margaret's sister Patty called. "Joe, the whole family has seen those posts. Everyone's talking about it. How could they be so cruel?" By evening, the screenshots had spread through our entire extended family network. Margaret's cousins, her former teaching colleagues, even parents of her old students who still followed our family on social media. Everyone could see exactly who Kevin, Rachel, and Matthew had become. The irony was perfect. In trying to publicly justify their abandonment, they'd publicly exposed their character. They'd documented their own moral failure for the entire world to see. At 8 p.m., as promised, they called me via FaceTime. "Dad, how was your Thanksgiving?" Rachel's voice was artificially bright, her cheeks flushed from sun and alcohol. Behind her, I could see the resort bar, tropical music playing, other vacationers laughing and drinking. "It was exactly what your mother would have wanted," I said truthfully. "We missed you," Kevin lied, a margarita clearly visible in his hand. "Did you?" I asked. "Because your social media posts suggest you were celebrating your freedom from family obligations." The laughter in the background stopped. All 3 of their faces changed. "You saw those?" Matthew asked nervously. "Everyone saw them, Matthew, the whole family. Margaret's friends, our neighbors. Everyone saw you celebrating while I honored your mother's memory alone." "Dad, those posts weren't about you. They were exactly about me. About abandoning me. About choosing beach parties over family traditions. About calling 42 years of marriage toxic patterns." The phone screen went quiet except for the distant sound of resort music. "We can explain," Rachel started. "No need," I said calmly. "You've explained perfectly. Actions speak louder than words, and social media posts speak loudest of all." I ended the call before they could respond. The documentation was complete. The public record established. Tomorrow, Robert Mitchell and I would make it official. Friday morning, November 29th, Robert Mitchell arrived at my house at 9 a.m. sharp. He carried a leather briefcase and the kind of serious expression that meant business. The Browns and Davises had stayed overnight, filling Margaret's guest rooms with the sounds of family life she'd missed during her final months. Children laughing, adults talking quietly over coffee. the kind of warmth our house had been missing for years. "Is everyone ready?" Robert asked, setting up his documents on Margaret's dining room table. Tom Brown nodded. "The kids are playing outside. They know this is important." Sarah Davis squeezed my hand. "Margaret would be proud of you, Joe." Robert opened his briefcase and pulled out multiple copies of legal documents. "Joe, before we begin, I want to confirm you understand the permanence of these changes." "I understand completely. The original will left your estate, valued at approximately $2.6 million, divided equally among Kevin, Rachel, and Matthew. These amendments transfer the bulk of those assets to the Brown and Davis families, with a substantial donation to the Margaret Johnson Cancer Research Fund." He spread out the new documents. "Tom Brown's family receives $400,000 in joint ownership of this house. Sarah Davis's family receives $400,000 and Margaret's car. The remaining $1.8 million establishes the Cancer Research Fund in Margaret's name." I looked around the table at faces filled with shock and gratitude. "Uncle Joe," Tom whispered, "we can't accept this." "You already have," I said firmly, "by being here, by caring for Margaret during her illness, by showing up when family was needed most." Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. "What about your children?" Robert consulted his notes. "Kevin, Rachel, and Matthew each received $5,000 and one item from Margaret's jewelry collection." "The jewelry box in our bedroom?" I asked. "Yes, the one Margaret prepared specifically for this scenario." Margaret's final surprise. She'd known her children would expect her jewelry, the diamond earrings, pearl necklace, sapphire ring their father had given her for their 25th anniversary, but Margaret had given those pieces to the cousin daughters months before her death. "What's actually in the jewelry box?" Tom asked. Robert smiled grimly. "A handwritten note from Margaret explaining why it's empty. Even in death, my wife was teaching lessons about entitlement versus earned rewards." "The legal timing is crucial," Robert continued. "I'm filing these amendments today. The children have 30 days to contest, but Margaret's anti-contest clause means they forfeit everything if they try." My phone rang. Kevin calling. "Answer it," Robert suggested. "Let's see if they've learned anything." I put it on speaker. "Dad, we need to talk." Kevin's voice was strained. "Those social media posts, we didn't mean them the way they sounded." "How did you mean them?" "We were just trying to process grief in our own way." "By calling our family traditions toxic?" Rachel's voice joined the call. "Dad, we made mistakes. We want to come home and talk." "Now you want to come home?" "We realized we were wrong," Matthew added. "We should have been there for Thanksgiving." I looked around the table at the people who had been there, who were still here. "Where are you now?" I asked. "At the airport," Kevin said. "We caught an early flight. We'll be home tonight." "Actually," I said calmly, "your timing is perfect. I'm in a meeting with Robert Mitchell right now, about your mother's estate." Silence. "You remember Robert?" I continued. "He handled your mother's will, the one that leaves you everything." "Dad, what's going on?" Rachel's voice had gone sharp with worry. "I'm exercising the discretionary clauses your mother insisted on, the ones that allow inheritance redistribution based on demonstrated character." "What does that mean?" Kevin demanded. Robert leaned toward the phone. "Kevin, this is Robert Mitchell. Your father is legally transferring the majority of your inheritance to family members who demonstrated commitment during your mother's illness and after her death." "You can't do that." "Actually, your mother specifically designed the will to allow exactly this. She anticipated that your true character might emerge after her death." "This is illegal," Kevin shouted. "We'll contest it." "You can try," Robert said calmly, "but contesting the will triggers the forfeiture clause. You'd lose everything." "How much are we losing?" Rachel asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Each of you receives $5,000 and one item from your mother's jewelry collection. And the rest goes to people who earned it through their actions." Matthew's voice cracked. "Dad, please. We made mistakes, but we're your children." "Yes, you are," I said quietly, "and I love you. But love doesn't mean ignoring behavior. Your mother understood that. Those social media posts were stupid, Rachel pleaded. We'll delete them. Too late, Sarah Davis said quietly. The whole family saw them. Everyone knows what you chose. Who are you? Kevin snapped. Sarah Davis, Margaret's cousin, the one who took vacation days to drive her to chemotherapy when you were too busy. We had jobs. So did I, Sarah cut him off. The difference is I prioritized family over convenience. Tom Brown leaned forward. Your father spent Thanksgiving alone cooking your mother's recipes while you posted beach photos. Do you understand how cruel that was? We didn't think. No, I said firmly. You didn't think. About me. About your mother's memory. About what family means. Dad, we can fix this, Matthew begged. We'll be better. I hope you will be, I said. For your own sake. But inheritance isn't about potential. It's about character already demonstrated. Robert gathered the documents. The paperwork is complete. Joe, if you're ready to sign. I picked up the pen Margaret had used to sign her own will 6 months ago. Wait, Kevin shouted through the phone. Don't do this. I'm not doing this, I said calmly. You did this. When you chose Cabo over family. When you called our traditions toxic. When you celebrated abandoning your grieving father. I signed my name with steady hands. Your mother's final wish was to reward character over genetics, I continued. Tom and Sarah and their families have been more family to us these past 2 years than you have. This isn't over, Kevin threatened. Yes, it is, Robert said firmly. The documents are signed and witnessed. Any legal challenge triggers total forfeiture. We'll be home tonight, Rachel said desperately. We'll talk this through. You're welcome to visit, I said. But this house now belongs jointly to the Brown family and me. They'll be living here, helping maintain your mother's memory the way you should have. The line went quiet except for muffled crying. I love you all, I said finally, but love sometimes means letting people face the consequences of their choices. I hung up. The status reversal was complete. My children, who'd assumed their inheritance was guaranteed, were now facing the reality of their behavior. The cousin families, who'd never expected anything beyond our gratitude, were now the true inheritors of Margaret's legacy. Saturday morning, November 30th, I woke up to the sound of children playing in Margaret's backyard. Emma and Sophie Brown were teaching little Olivia Davis how to rake leaves into jumping piles, their laughter echoing through the house like music Margaret hadn't heard in years. Tom Brown was already in the kitchen making coffee and reading the local newspaper. Morning, Uncle Joe. Sleep well? Better than I have in months, I said truthfully. For the first time since Margaret's death, the house felt alive again, full of people who understood that family is about showing up, not showing off. Robert Mitchell called at 8:30 a.m. Joe, I've filed all the paperwork with the county. The estate amendments are officially recorded. I also wanted you to know I've drafted the paperwork for the Margaret Johnson Cancer Research Fund. The hospital foundation is thrilled about the $1.8 million donation. When's the ceremony? December 15th, 2 weeks from today. The hospital wants to make it a proper memorial event. They're inviting Margaret's former colleagues, her cancer treatment team, and the families she helped during her illness. A public celebration of Margaret's life and legacy, exactly what she would have wanted. There's something else, Robert continued. Your children landed last night. Kevin called my office 3 times. He wants to schedule an emergency meeting. What did you tell him? That any discussion of the inheritance triggers the contest clause. He can call you directly if he wants to talk, but legal challenges are off the table. At 10:15 a.m., a car pulled into my driveway. Through Margaret's front window, I watched Kevin, Rachel, and Matthew climb out of a rental car. They looked exhausted, sunburned, and defeated. All 3 stood on the front porch for several minutes before Kevin finally knocked. I opened the door to find my children looking smaller somehow. Diminished. Dad, Kevin said quietly, can we come in? Of course, you're always welcome in your mother's house. They filed into the living room where Margaret's photos covered every surface. Wedding pictures, family vacations, school events they'd actually attended in childhood. Tom Brown appeared from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand. The children's faces showed recognition and confusion. You remember Tom, I said. Margaret's nephew. He's living here now, helping me maintain the house. Living here? Rachel asked. This is his home too, according to your mother's revised will. Sarah Davis emerged from Margaret's sewing room carrying a photo album. Hello, Kevin. Rachel, Matthew. What are you doing here? Matthew asked. I'm organizing Margaret's photos for the memorial ceremony, Sarah replied calmly. 2 weeks from today. The hospital is honoring her legacy with the Cancer Research Fund. Cancer Research Fund? Rachel's voice cracked. $1.8 million in your mother's name, I explained. Money that will help other families avoid what we went through. Kevin slumped into Margaret's recliner. Dad, we messed up. We know we messed up. Yes, you did. Can we fix it? Rachel asked desperately. I sat across from them on the couch where Margaret and I had spent 42 years of evenings. What do you think fixing it looks like? We'll be better, Matthew said quickly. We'll visit more. We'll honor Mom's traditions. When? I asked. What? When will you be better? Starting when? Next Thanksgiving? Next crisis? Next time I need you and you have vacation plans? They had no answer. Tom Brown set down his coffee mug. Your father spent 18 months watching your mother die. He held her hand through chemotherapy, slept in hospital chairs, learned to cook her favorite foods when she couldn't keep anything down. We visited, Kevin started. Occasionally, Sarah Davis interrupted. When convenient, when it didn't interfere with your schedules. Meanwhile, Tom continued, Sarah and I were here every week. Our kids called her Grandma Maggie. They made her cards during chemo. They brought joy to her final months. We had jobs, Rachel protested weakly. So did we, Sarah replied, but we prioritized family over career advancement. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screenshots of their Cabo posts. This is what you prioritized, beach parties over family grief. Rachel started crying. We were hurting too. I know you were, I said gently, but hurt people can choose to support each other or abandon each other. You chose abandonment. What do we have to do? Kevin asked. To get our inheritance back? The wrong question, still focused on money, not relationships. You can't get it back, I said firmly. It's gone. Permanently transferred to people who earned it. But we're your children. And they're my family, I replied, gesturing to Tom and Sarah. Family by choice, family by action, family by presence during crisis. Matthew looked around the room desperately. What about Mom's jewelry? Her diamond earrings? The pearls you gave her for your anniversary? I stood up and walked to Margaret's bedroom, returning with a small wooden jewelry box. Your mother left this for you. I placed it on the coffee table. Kevin opened it with trembling hands. Empty, except for a folded piece of paper. Kevin unfolded Margaret's final letter to them. Kevin, Rachel, and Matthew, if you're reading this, it means you expected to inherit jewelry you never bothered to ask about while I was alive. The diamond earrings went to Emma Brown, who held my hand during every chemo session. The pearl necklace went to Sophie Brown, who read to me when I was too weak to hold books. The sapphire ring went to Olivia Davis, who drew me pictures that covered my hospital room walls. These girls earned these treasures through love, presence, and sacrifice. You earned this empty box through absence, excuses, and entitlement. Love was always a choice. You chose poorly, Mom. The room fell silent, except for Rachel's quiet sobbing. She gave away our inheritance before she died, Kevin whispered. She gave your inheritance to her real grandchildren, I corrected, the ones who were actually present for her final months. This is so unfair, Matthew said. What's unfair, Tom Brown said quietly, is children who take everything and give nothing back. I stood up. You're welcome to visit any time. You're welcome at family dinners. You're welcome to honor your mother's memory with us. But, Kevin asked, but you're not welcome to expect rewards for behavior you haven't earned. That lesson ends today. They left without another word, carrying only the empty jewelry box and Margaret's final truth. Through the front window, I watched them drive away, probably forever changed by the reality that actions have consequences. For the first time since Margaret's death, I felt truly at peace. The Margaret Johnson Cancer Research Fund Memorial Ceremony took place on December 15th in the hospital's main atrium. Sunlight streamed through tall windows onto a crowd of nearly 200 people. Margaret's teaching colleagues, former students, medical staff, and the families she'd helped during her own cancer journey. Dr. Sarah Thompson, Margaret's oncologist, spoke first. Margaret Johnson faced her diagnosis with grace and used her experience to mentor other patients. This research fund will help us develop better treatments so fewer families endure what the Johnsons faced. When they unveiled the memorial plaque, polished bronze with Margaret's photo and the words, "Dedicated to healing through love and research," I felt her presence like a warm hand on my shoulder. Tom and Sarah's families sat in the front row with me. Emma Brown wore Margaret's diamond earrings, Sophie had the pearl necklace, and little Olivia Davis clutched the sapphire ring like a treasure. Kevin, Rachel, and Matthew stood in the back corner, looking uncomfortable and out of place. They'd driven 2 hours to attend, but hadn't spoken to anyone except to sign the guest book. After the ceremony, people approached them with confusion. "I thought you lived in California," Mrs. Henderson from Margaret's book club said to Matthew. "Your father mentioned you moved away years ago." "I didn't know you were still involved with the family," Dr. Peterson, my grief counselor, said to Rachel. "Joe told me his children had chosen distance after Margaret's death." Word had spread through our community about the Thanksgiving abandonment and inheritance changes. Not through gossip, but through natural conversation. When people asked about my children, I told the truth. They'd chosen other priorities. The social consequences were swift and visible. Kevin's law firm partners began asking discreet questions. Corporate lawyers depend on reputation and character references. When senior partners learned that Kevin had posted beach vacation photos while his father grieved alone, their confidence in his judgment wavered. I heard through mutual connections that Kevin Johnson made some poor family decisions recently, one partner mentioned to another within earshot of office staff. Character issues always surface eventually. Kevin's path to partnership, which had seemed guaranteed 6 months earlier, suddenly became uncertain. Rachel faced similar professional fallout. Her marketing agency prided itself on authentic brand representation. When colleagues discovered she'd publicly celebrated abandoning family traditions while calling them toxic, they questioned her understanding of authentic messaging. How can we trust someone to represent family values in campaigns when she can't maintain them in her own life? Her creative director asked privately. A major client, a family-oriented restaurant chain, specifically requested that Rachel be removed from their account after someone shared her Cabo Instagram posts with their management team. Matthew's consequences proved the most severe. His tech startup depended on investor confidence and community connections. When potential investors, several of whom had known Margaret personally, learned about his family abandonment, funding conversations ended abruptly. "We invest in character as much as concepts," one venture capitalist explained to his associates. "Someone who abandons a grieving parent for social media content doesn't have the moral foundation we require." Matthew's startup, which had been valued at $300,000 in November, folded by January when investors withdrew support. The professional damage wasn't malicious. It was inevitable. Character revealed in personal crisis always impacts professional relationships. Meanwhile, the cousin families flourished. Tom Brown used his inheritance portion to expand his plumbing business, hiring 3 additional employees and establishing a scholarship fund for trade school students. Margaret always believed in practical education, he told the local newspaper. This honors her memory while helping young people build careers. Sarah Davis invested her inheritance in a nonprofit organization supporting cancer patients' families. Margaret showed us how to turn pain into purpose, she explained during a television interview. This foundation continues her legacy of caring for others during their darkest moments. Their children thrived in Margaret's house. Emma and Sophie Brown transformed Margaret's garden into a memorial space where neighborhood children could play safely. Olivia Davis learned to cook using Margaret's recipes, keeping family traditions alive in ways my own children had refused. The house filled with laughter, homework sessions, family dinners, and holiday celebrations. Margaret's spirit lived on through people who understood that inheritance isn't automatic. It's earned through love, presence, and sacrifice. By February, a full 3 months after Thanksgiving, the consequences had crystallized into permanent changes. Kevin moved to a smaller law firm in another city, his partnership dreams derailed by reputation damage. He called once to ask if I'd write a character reference letter. I declined, explaining that character references must be earned through demonstrated character. Rachel left her marketing agency and took a corporate communications job with significantly less creative freedom and lower pay. Her personal brand as an authentic lifestyle influencer had been irreparably damaged by her own authentic behavior. Matthew moved back in with his ex-girlfriend, his entrepreneurial ambitions temporarily crushed. He'd learned that investors investigate personal character as thoroughly as business plans. None of them contested the will. They understood that Margaret's anti-contest clause would cost them their remaining $5,000 each, and they needed every dollar for their diminished circumstances. The final consequence came in March, when Margaret's memorial garden officially opened at the hospital. Funded entirely by the Research Foundation, it provided a peaceful space for patients and families to find comfort during treatment. At the dedication ceremony, Dr. Thompson read a letter from a family whose child had been helped by early research funded through Margaret's foundation. Because of Mrs. Johnson's gift, our daughter received experimental treatment that saved her life. Her legacy lives on in every family that doesn't have to say goodbye. Margaret had achieved immortality not through her biological children, but through her moral choices and the people who honored them. The empty jewelry box had taught its final lesson. True inheritance comes through character, not genetics. And character, once lost, takes generations to rebuild. Spring arrived early that year. By April, Margaret's memorial garden at the hospital was blooming with daffodils and tulips, flowers she'd planted in our backyard every autumn for 42 years. The house had transformed into something Margaret would recognize but never expected. A multi-generational family home where children did homework at her kitchen table, where Sunday dinners happened naturally, where holidays were celebrated by people who wanted to be there. Tom Brown's family had moved into the guest wing, while Sarah Davis's family took the converted basement apartment. We'd created an intentional family structure based on mutual support rather than genetic accident. I still set Margaret's place at the table during them special occasions, not from grief, but from gratitude. Her empty chair reminded us all that love creates legacy through choices, not chromosomes. My biological children called, occasionally. Awkward conversations about weather and work, carefully avoiding family topics. They'd learned that complaining about consequences only reinforced the reasons for those consequences. Kevin had found steady work at a smaller firm, slowly rebuilding his reputation through consistently ethical behavior. Rachel had started a small consulting business focused on authentic communications, ironic but genuine. Matthew was learning carpentry, discovering satisfaction in building things that lasted. Perhaps they were finally learning Margaret's lessons about earning rather than expecting. But the most profound change was in me. For 42 years, I'd defined myself as husband and father. Margaret's death had stripped away the husband identity. My children's behavior had forced me to redefine the father role. I was still a father, but now I chose which relationships deserve that energy. Tom Brown's children called me Grandpa Joe. Sarah Davis's daughter brought me her school papers to review, just like Margaret used to do for neighborhood kids. These relationships felt earned and genuine rather than obligated and strained. I'd learned Margaret's final lesson. Family is about presence, not genetics. About choice, not chance. About character demonstrated through crisis, not comfort assumed through blood. The inheritance had been just money. The real legacy was the model of how to honor memory through action rather than assumption. Every month, I received updates from the Margaret Johnson Cancer Research Fund. New treatments developed. Families helped. Lives saved through Margaret's sacrifice transformed into healing for others. That was inheritance worth leaving. Love multiplied through choice rather than diminished through entitlement. 6 months after Thanksgiving, I finally understood what Margaret had been teaching me through her careful estate planning. She hadn't been punishing our children. She'd been protecting our values. Some lessons require loss to be learned. Some boundaries require consequences to be respected. Some love requires distance to be appreciated. Margaret's empty chair wasn't just memorial. It was reminder that presence is privilege, not right. Have you ever had to choose between enabling family and honoring someone's memory? Because sometimes the greatest act of love is letting people face the truth about their choices.